Read the last section.
Section 3, the statute take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Flanagan, Klein, Stewart, Cousins, Young.
Senator Aspagliato to explain his vote. Can I have some order in the House, please?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I share concerns with this bill not having any ethics or campaign finance reform. However, it changes from the original resolution proposed by this House, which called for an end to sanctuary cities, and I am supportive of that. It also provides a provision that allows the service-disabled veterans to get more opportunities for their own businesses. And finally, it also reforms the World Trade Center Volunteer Fund to ensure that additional state funds will be used to cover medical expenses denied by the Federal Sedroga Act. For those reasons, Mr. President, I will be voting in the affirmative.
Senator Aspagliato to be recorded in the affirmative. Announce the results.
Aye, 62.
Bill is passed. Secretary will read. We're going to make a correction to the last bill. Secretary will re-announce the results.
Aye, 61, nays 1. Senator Hoylman recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Senator
The Secretary
Young
will read.
Senator Young moved to discharge the Committee on Finance Assembly Bill number 9007C and substitute the identical Senate Bill 6407C, third reading calendar 515.
Secretary will read the last substitution is so ordered, and Secretary will read.
Calendar number 515, Assembly Budget Bill, Assembly Print 9007C, an act intentionally omitted.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if a sponsor or perhaps Senator Hannan would yield for a few questions.
Can I ask the House again, please, to come to order? We have a number of people in the House today, two very important bills and two members that wish to exchange, so I would please ask order in the House. Senator Rivera, you may continue. Senator Hannan, do you yield?
Yes.
Senator Hannan yields. Senator Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a few basic questions about what is and is not in this bill as it refers to the original budget proposal that the governor put before us.
With the chair's permission, could I go into a little bit of an outline of the bill, if you don't mind?
I don't mind, through you, Mr. President.
We'll allow the outline. Senator Rivera has agreed. Senator Hannan, you may continue.
This is the Article 7 bill in regard to health and aging, and there are several highlights of what's in the bill. First of all, we have kept the traumatic brain injury waiver and making sure it does not go into managed care for another year. We have preserved provider prevail protections for medications, did not move beyond where we were before. We have rejected cuts to early intervention. We have kept spousal refusal in the state it was before because we thought changing it would be counterproductive. We have restored the cuts to the excess medical malpractice pool because we feel that's an equitable solution for upstate health care. We have preserved the the naturally occurring retirement communities in neighborhood Newarks. We were also able to restore a program for $195 million in capital grants, with 30% of that going to community providers. We've added $1 million in the program for doctors across New York. There are very important funds added to OASIS for heroin prevention and treatment. We have added a provision in regard to monies for making sure that New York tests all the rape kits. And we have restored funding for organ donation, eating disorders, and Lyme disease activities. And that's just a broad outline of what we've done.
Mr. President, through you, the Senator would continue to yield. Thank you, Mr. President. A few things that I wanted to go into a little bit deeper. First, related to the $195 million for capital transformation. If you could go a little bit into what the bill before us does as far as the process of how that money is going to be dispersed.
process is a little complicated because the idea is to do a combination both of bonding and in grants for operations, so that it provides for both the DASNY and for existing grant procedures in the Department of Health, and to the reason that once they look at the requests and see whether it's capital or whether it's operating, they'll be able to best disperse the monies, and there is an exchange provision between the two. It would be for the benefit, and it would all be by state finance law.
Through you, Mr. President, if the Senator would continue to yield.
Senator yields.
To go a little bit, to just ask one specific question about that, ultimately the authority to disperse the money, to determine where it would go, would belong to the budget director, if I'm not mistaken, so it would be the second floor.
The budget director and with the health commissioner.
Through you, Mr. President, if the Senator would continue to yield.
Senator yields.
Yes. Thank you. Two, and this was should have been my first question. Something that is not here, and I want to, excuse me, I want to make sure that we underline the initial proposal by the governor to shift costs on Medicaid growth rates to the city of New York. Is it anywhere in this budget proposal?
It's not in this bill, and I don't know if Senator Gianaris will allow me to refer to things that may not be before us yet, but it will be coming with fair certainty that the proposal to go back and not allow the state to pick up the monies for the increase in growth in Medicaid for the city, that should be reversed. It's a fairly complicated procedure, but I believe at the end of the day, we're not going to be taking that money from the city.
Through you, Mr. President, if the Senator would continue to yield.
Senator yields.
So you're saying that it might be, at the end of the day, it's not going to be taken away from the city, but as far as how we switched it back from the original proposal, it is not on this bill, it will be on another one that we have yet to see?
It morphed from, should we just reject it, to it morphed into the governor came up with something somewhat at the last minute, which was confusing to a lot of people, that it became a transformation type of process, that maybe other parts of the state would want to do it, although they already, there was questions as to whether they had the power to do it. So it's a process that's there for the rest of the state. It would be absolutely voluntary for the city. It would also involve helping the city in regard to monies to pay for Medicaid, but also monies that are needed for what's known as, should be HAC? Using for HAC, the process of intergovernmental transfers, one of the complicated parts of the Medicaid reimbursement process in the state and in federal law. So at the end of the day, this would have to be worked out between the state and the city of New York, and it would be, I think, a major net benefit to cash in the city of New York, helping HHC, which, as we know, has been financially stressed.
Through you, Mr. President, the Senator would yield for one more question.
Yes, good point.
Senator yields.
Regarding Health Republic, there's obviously been a conversation that we've had.
Further, I'm reminded, those actions will be all administrative, so they won't be in any bill that we will see, but frankly, there've been lots of discussions and lots of negotiations on it, so they're very real. I'm sorry.
To the other,
Senator Hannon yields.
I thank the Senator for clarifying that earlier point, but lastly, on Health Republic, as it relates to any actions that we might take in this budget, excuse me, to make the providers that have already, provided services that are how to make them whole. There have been many conversations about what we could potentially do, what we must do for these providers. Is there anything in this budget bill, or maybe in other budget bills that we haven't seen yet, regarding Health Republic?
There's nothing in this budget bill about Health Republic. In other bills that have been discussed and negotiated, I believe there'll be a provision. Now, we have not accepted at all the idea of going to a guarantee fund because that was too dramatic at this point. Even though it was first sponsored by Senator Valesky, then I had my friend Senator Seward against it, so we had to come to a compromise. The thought is establish a fund that can be used for reimbursing claimants, but establish a fund that would become activated once the liquidation process, if it ever gets to be commenced, once the liquidation process for Health Republic goes through the procedures of the Department of Financial Services, and the idea would be at some point have the budget and obviously the administration identify one of the settlement funds that the state has received by virtue of action of either DFS or the Attorney General as a funding. The thought being those are one-shot revenues. Hopefully this Health Republic event is a one-shot loss so that we could match that, and then hopefully down the road we would take a look at the whole approval process, rate-setting process of the insurance system and the health system so we could better protect the people of this state.
Through you, Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Rivera on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Hannan, for kind of breaking down what is on this bill. As I stated earlier, most of these bills are somewhat vanilla. Therefore, a lot of the big items that might be more controversial will be left till later. But a couple of things that I want to point out. First, the initial proposal to shift the costs of Medicaid growth to the City of New York, which would have been disastrous for the City of New York, particularly for HHC hospitals. I'm very thankful that this proposal before us does not have that in it. As far as the transformation fund of the $195 million for capital improvements, I'm both thankful that it's there, but I am hopeful that the process is a little bit more transparent than the one that we just went through for the $1.2 billion that we allocated last year. There are many very deserving projects that unfortunately did not receive funding, including projects certainly in my backyard and other parts of the state, without which I'm not sure whether they can achieve the goals that we're trying to set for them as far as DSRIP and lowering hospitalization rates for Medicaid patients. So I'm very thankful that that money is there, hoping to work with the second floor as well as with my colleagues to make sure that it goes to the right places where it's needed. And lastly, I'm thankful that we are having a conversation about Health Republic. We have to make sure, I think that Senator Hannan nailed it when he says we want to make sure that it is a one-time thing. Hopefully we will be able to have discussions about what exactly that means as far as making the people that have already provided services whole, and that we do not have to go down this road again. But most of the things that are very controversial have been taken out of this piece of legislation. As it is certainly acceptable. I'll be voting in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Rivera. Senator Hamilton.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Would the sponsor of the bill please yield to a question?
Senator Hannan, do you yield?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the question of temporary operators. And let's get clarification on that.
We push that off.
Under mental health, temporary operators?
Refer to the
Mental health, Part L. Right. But just clarify what it actually, how you define it, the three-way agreement, how it relates to the OPWDD and OMH to appoint a temporary operator.
How do they relate?
Yes. Yeah, we just want an explanation of what the program is.
Same. It's very close to what we've done and put in statute for all health care. There are times when these not-for-profits are having problems. The idea is that you need to continue the services, but the people who are doing the management are not sufficient to continue those services, so that there is a need to have the department be able to step in and have somebody run it and make sure there's a continuity.
Yes, thank you. Chair, would the sponsor yield to another question, please?
Senator Hannan, do you yield?
Yes.
Senator yields.
I think the senator is correct in that the proposal is great to address the serious financial situations nonprofits may be having. Right now, we have the highest homeless rate in New York City, over 60,000 people living in homeless shelters. A large component of that are people who have mental illness. My question is, why wasn't the homeless shelters, people with domestic violence and runaway youth included for the not-for-profits to be investigated for serious financial
Philosophically, we make too many silos, so we don't have really directly under mental health the people who are suffering because they have other problems, or they're homeless, or they have a drug program. We haven't integrated this well enough, and we ought to, but we were handed this budget in this way. We still kept these separate. We still have to address all of that and how we're going to go about. You could also make a case that when the new federal waiver called DSRIP fully kicks in, and we're trying to avoid admissions to hospitals, we'll also have an integration of services so that we won't have people suffering from overdose or mental illness and therefore becoming homeless and therefore addressing the healthcare system. There's a far greater need for integration. We do have in health, we do have a provision for supportive home services, a couple of $100 million. That's only gotten off the ground. I'm including a couple of years of appropriation there. So there is a whole need to address this, and we're still, as a government and as a society, trying to figure out how we're going to do this appropriately.
I do agree with you on that point. Would the sponsor yield to another question, Chair? The last question is, once there is a three-way agreement, will the local legislator, the governing body, be notified of the appointment of an operator?
This was discussed. The question is when the notification would be made. There was questions of whether it would be done prior to the legislature or whether it would be just subsequent. There are policy reasons not to do it prior to from a bureaucratic standpoint, but at the moment it's going to be when the appointment is made, then the legislature will be notified.
Thank you. Great. Would the sponsor yield to another question?
Sponsor yields.
I think this is a great idea, but my last question is, what happens if the non-for-profit does go into serious financial problems? What happens to the real estate that is owned by the non-for-profit if it's...
The reason for the temporary operator, if you have someone goes bankrupt or needs to be liquidated, then normal legal procedures start to use those as assets, and that gets to pay off creditors. If you have a temporary operator, you keep the entity together, in a sense. You have the services continue to be delivered. You have a revenue stream that comes from Medicaid, and so you could theoretically, with better management, handle those bills. And what's the ultimate goal? People who are getting the services continue to get the services.
Great. No further questions. I'd like to speak on the bill.
Senator Hamilton on the bill.
I think this is a great idea. What's been happening recently in certain communities, there's been a receiver put in place. And then rather than having corrective measures, the receiver is proceeding to the court for dissolution of these non-for-profits. And what's happening now, non-for-profits who bought properties for $30,000 a year, let's say 35 years ago, are now worth $2 million. And I just feel that this is a great idea that we don't have receivers who are being paid $75,000 per month to make a determination that a not-for-profit is not doing well. And I believe that they are targeting organizations and communities of color that are being gentrified, not because they're not doing well, but because they want their real property assets. So I think this is a great idea, but I also want to make sure that the local legislatures are notified prior to the operator put in place to make sure that the corrective measures are done appropriately, and certain communities are not targeted by members who used to work for OPWDD and now have left, and using that information to target the not-for-profits that are on the fringe of not doing a great job, but are doing a sufficient job. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Stavisky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yields.
I have one question. I thank you for your explanation on the resolution of the financial difficulties experienced by Health Republic. Do you anticipate all of the providers being reimbursed, or is it going to be the big, larger groups? How do you see the individuals receiving the reimbursement for services to Health Republic that they have already provided?
Well, I think we need to see a process that people can make the claims. Right now, all we have are informal surveys by the different organizations, you know, home care or hospitals, and they've or the physicians, they've surveyed their members. How much do you think you're out? If we have a more formal process, be it through the liquidation or through this fund that we've set up, that people can make a formal claim, can do the proof of that formal claim, then you get somebody who's making the decisions as to how to make the awards based on what the priorities are, based on, you know, patients are in this too. So we really need to get the procedure going. Absent the procedure, no one can actually tell what's owed and what can be delivered.
So that nobody's left behind. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Stavisky. Senator Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the sponsor could please yield for some questions.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. Just going back to a section that there were some questions about, the health care transformation package, which continues the previous year's commitments on Oneida County and Brooklyn, but then creates a $200 million statewide program. Is this exclusively for hospitals, or can this be for other community-based healthcare programs? Because during the budget hearings, they were the ones so desperate for
On your
money.
question, what is the purpose of this? First of all, I think it's, do we, 195 million? It's 195 million technically, because 5 million is going to be used for mammogram vans. So it's 195. And then it can be used for any healthcare providers. Though we have put in here, we wanted more, but we put in that 30% of this would go to community. 30 million, excuse me, would go to community healthcare providers. So we did a little priority there, but the rest of it could be any healthcare provider.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. Can more than 30 million go to community healthcare providers? It's just a bottom that
Yes.
30 million has to go.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
What's the process of who will make the decisions on this? Is this an RFP through the Department of Health? How does this work?
I presume they're going to use the continued way they have allocated money that we had in the 1.6 billion, whether it be for the first procedure we had or the second. It's going to be an award process. They'll score the awards, and they'll try and hopefully use great judgment. I must admit that there's not enough money, because there's a lot of people who made applications and didn't get the award, so there's going to be a lot of hopes. Preference is to people who made applications to the process before and did not get funded. And that's important, because many of those people are participating in the federal waiver and feel that their applications are essential to them successfully participating in that waiver program.
So the sponsor actually guessed what my next question was going to be. Thank you for that answer. Excuse me, I have a question on another section of the bill, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor
Yes.
yields.
Thank you. There was reference to a new proposal with heroin, dealing with the heroin opioid epidemic. And then I think in an earlier statement, Senator Young talked about new money for something. Can we clarify what there is for heroin opioid abuse in this bill, and how it might correlate with some money that might or might not be there in a future bill we have yet to see?
Basically, talking about expanding what OASIS is doing and the new applications for people who have had overdoses, for people who people who are addicted in their families, trying to lead to greater expansion of rehabilitation clinics. So it is much of the natural expansion that needs to be done.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
So we should see some X amount of money for RFPs for a larger number of rehab facilities or a larger number of slots in existing rehab facilities?
I think building on what the governor proposed, adding 25 million to that, we get to the order of 160 million,
And through you, Mr. President,
in case they don't give us the money.
oh, I want to wait to make sure you get your numbers. Okay. Through you, Mr. President, so these also will be an RFP process through OASIS for new providers to apply?
I think there's a mixture of different award procedures, but it would be pursuant to what they would do in ordinary course.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
Is there any geographic distribution of these new funds for this purpose?
Not at this moment. Not at this moment, but we have a very energized group of senators who've been participating in the chair's hearings throughout the state, knowing there are problems throughout the state. And so they're all vigorous proponents of new initiatives from Niagara to Suffolk.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
And just in comment, I think every county of the state is suffering from the growing problem, and I think that it is correct that there is no community that doesn't see the need for more support and help for people who are suffering from opioid addictions, heroin addictions, and the desperate need for more access to immediate health care and mental health care upon realization of the problem. So I'm glad to see more money. I'm glad to see there will be opportunities for more providers to draw down on this money and hopefully expand the number of slots, because I'm not sure there's anything worse than knowing you have a problem, going in search of help, and not being able to find any. So I'm very supportive of expanding this. I want to shift to some of the things that were removed from this bill relating to drug pricing and evaluation of pharmaceutical pricing. If, through you, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
So a number of sections were removed from this bill that involved the governor's original proposals for some changes in the pricing and evaluation of pharmaceutical drugs. Can the sponsor both explain a little bit about what was lost and what remains?
I'm not so sure that the things that are intentionally omitted were losses, because they were more hopes. They tried to deal with, quote, blockbuster drugs that weren't identified with no procedure. They tried to deal with specialty drugs that weren't identified and there was no procedure. The thought was that, and they were price controls. If anybody, and I found out by asking various professionals in healthcare whether they had any background in price controls, because we last really had them in World War II, and no one did. And I remember from my economics studies, they led to huge bureaucracies and not necessarily efficiencies. So the thought was we need to deal with overpricing in drugs. We had the fact of one of the manufacturers who became fairly infamous, taking a $13.50 drug and escalating it to $750. We proposed a type of surcharge going after price gouging. The executive came back with a proposal that's contained in this bill and deals with when the price of a generic drug has increased by more than 300% in any given year, allowing the administration to deal with that in regard to a surcharge on that drug manufacturer.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor
Yes.
yields.
So the proposal is specific to generic drugs only?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
Can the sponsor help me understand under what scenario an existing drug, which is generic, hence it has come after years of a patent on a parallel drug, under what scenario a generic drug would need to go up 300% in cost per year?
That's what we're trying to avoid. I don't know the legitimate scenario that there would be, but I do know it's happened. It's happened in several instances, and people have had to pay more. Now, in regard to brand drugs, we know the federal government has a program that's operating in regard to this, so we were not going to step into that. And in the proposal that's in this budget, on regard to generic drugs, when and if, and it's likely it's going to be a when, the federal government deals with generic drugs also, that we would not cease to continue with this program. We would not cease to continue the program.
I understand. Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
It's very helpful, the answers to the questions. I want to thank the sponsor. So is this rebate? If you go up on your drug by 300%, we're going to rebate back 295% of it? How much is the rebate?
I think it's negotiated with the manufacturer.
The sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
It's negotiated by the executive, by the Department of Health, by whom?
Really, the Department of Health through their Drug Utilization Board.
For the drug. Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
So if I was smart about this and I had a generic drug that I wanted to drive the prices up on, I'll just do 299% increase every year?
I would presume that would be the case, but I'm not so sure that you could be confident you could continue in the state's programs, because we also have another look-see as to whether you can participate in Medicaid. We have a utilization board that you take a look at. We have the Medicaid, we have the powers under the global spending cap that we can make adjustments in regard to drug prices. We have had all of the Medicaid managed care companies go with a pharmaceutical benefit manager who is pretty fierce. So the idea is to try to make this as reasonable as possible and not have some drug company take advantage of our treasury.
Mr. President, on the bill,
Senator Kruger on the bill.
I want to thank the sponsor for his answers to my questions and to my colleagues' questions. Appreciate very much his knowledge base. My last set of questions is actually out of my frustration that we have yet to figure out how to do more to control pharmaceutical drug pricing for our citizens. The concept, just again to repeat, these are generic drugs. Hence, they were name brand drugs under patents for some period of time, could be 10, 20, even 30, 40 years. So they're not new drugs where R&D was involved in the costing of them. They're drugs that have been on the market. And suddenly we're seeing skyrocketing increases in their costs, again, over 300% a year. And the sponsor gave one example where I can't even calculate what the growth in that rate was. There is no justification or excuse for these kinds of drugs to see these kinds of price increases. We removed from the budget bill a series of proposals that the sponsor may or may not be right about, that there wasn't a way for us to figure this out correctly. I'm not convinced we couldn't figure it out correctly. Frankly, I hope we take another bite at that apple. It's very clear to me that until the federal government and states start to become incredibly aggressive at challenging the pricing of pharmaceutical drugs, generic and name brand, until we hold the manufacturers accountable for justifying their expenses, the cost of their drugs, we're going to continue to see a greater and greater share of America's personal budgets and our government budgets going to the cost of pharmaceuticals. And we are going to continue to see, most disturbingly perhaps, low-income people, low-income seniors making the decisions about whether they can afford their drugs or their food each month. Most countries in the world have figured this out for themselves. We have not yet. I am not opposed to this proposal. I am just frustrated that we haven't figured out how to do more on behalf of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kruger. Is there any other senator that wishes to be heard? Seeing none, hearing none, debate is closed. The secretary will ring the bell. Senator DeFrancisco?
While we're waiting for everyone to congregate, I just wanted to mention that for the senators, there's food out there, and probably all of you have eaten already, but those that didn't, we're going to go at ease right after we take this vote until 7:15, 45 minutes. And if we all come back at time, we'll resume on the third bill. That way you give people the opportunity to continue this process in a humane manner.